Okay, Mario, we discuss the war in Ukraine. What is your opinion on this subject?
Hi, Robert. Yes, I'm totally against any war, and I'm monitoring a little bit that things which are happening around the world and in between the war in Ukraine. And I don't have some strong opinion because I think only domestic people there know their truth. I don't think there is a truth about any war, except that is big influence. It was big influence from the European Union and especially from the US. And since the regime changed in 2014, things went down and actually resulted in the war. What was my comment? So as I said, we can elaborate later. As a participant in war in Yugoslavia, I'm strongly against any war, especially orchestrated for political reasons, which means if there is any provocation which was present, let's say, since 2014, as they say, I can just tell what I read and hear. So I'm against any political reason for the war. I'm totally disgusted by excuses politicians make for the war, whatever they are. I'm totally disgusted with the calculations of civilian casualties, because I think every life is priceless. Doesn't matter if it's soldier or civilian. The thing how they generally talk about collateral casualties and destruction of human life, destruction of the country, of the resources, and everything is totally out of my mind. So that saying that the end justifies the means is for me totally out of common sense, because every sacrifice of human life, any sacrifice of human life cannot be justified, except it's a person's will or decision to sacrifice himself or herself to saving maybe other life or whatever. But from politicians' stand of view, talking about this means or that means, why we need to go to war and why we need to free something or somebody, that just empty talk and without common sense. So the general, I wouldn't like to analyze the situation because there are opposite information. I haven't been there. I don't know what is going on in Ukraine. I can just repeat what is in the media or watching Putin or other politicians talk. So this is my stance on any war, especially that in Ukraine, which I think is totally avoidable, because we know that Boris Johnson actually stopped the tries to agree to sign the peace agreement early in the war, a few weeks maybe after the invasion or military operation, how they say. What is your opinion?
Okay, so this is a very big topic. So I will mention at the beginning that in Judaism, wars of aggressive conquest over other nations are forbidden as theft for Gentile governments. And the source for this ruling is the Divine Code by Rabbi Weiner, 3rd edition, page 633. Therefore, this situation and this war in Ukraine is not some abstract occurrence which is impossible to classify, the Jewish Torah already considers situations like these, and it has specific rulings what to do and what not to do. In 2014, Russia conquered Crimea. She has been stealing Ukrainian land since then, and I believe that a good question to ask is why. So I believe that the Russian Orthodox Church, for example, is one of the main sources of Russian imperialism. I believe it could not care less about God, and I believe that the only thing the Russian Orthodox Church cares about is Russian imperialism. Now, a major part of this war is the propaganda war. Russians claim that the Ukrainian people do not exist and that the Ukrainian language does not exist. Because linguistics is my main secular interest, I know a thing or two about languages. And one of my favorite books is A Grammar of the Croatian Language by Težak and Babić. They describe standard Croatian and they classify all the Slavic languages. So I will read the original Croatian because I want to cite the precise wording regarding this topic. So just a second until I get my grammar, okay? So it says, potvrđeni slavenski jezici dijele se prema užoj srodnosti u 3 skupine. Istočnoslavensku, zapadnoslavensku i južnoslavensku. Istočnoslavenski su jezici ruski, bjeloruski i ukrajinski. An English translation would be, the confirmed Slavic languages are divided according to close kinship into 3 groups: East Slavic, West Slavic, and South Slavic. The East Slavic languages are Russian, Belarusian, and Ukrainian. Therefore, professional linguists like Težak and Babić reject the Russian propaganda that the Ukrainian language does not exist. As regards the existence of the Ukrainian people, the modern name Ukrainci, Ukrainians, is derived from Ukraina, Ukraine, a name first documented in the Kiev Chronicle under the year 1187. I repeat, the modern name Ukrainci, Ukrainians, is derived from Ukraina, Ukraine, a name first documented in the Kiev Chronicle under the year 1187. Therefore, the Ukrainian people have existed at least since the year 1187. So, when you start a war of aggressive conquest, you are not the most popular guy, as you can imagine. There are at least 2 Russian military units fighting for Ukraine against Putin. The first is the Freedom of Russia Legion. The second is the Russian Volunteer Corps. And I want to read from their official website, actually. So it says, excuse me, the Russian Volunteer Corps is a military political organization of Russian volunteers, primarily citizens of the Russian Federation residing in Ukraine, who have been involved in the conflict on the side of Ukraine since 2014 and have stood up for its defense since February 24th, 2022. Since the start of the full-scale war, our fighters have been participating in combat operations in the Chernihiv, Kyiv, Kherson, Zaporizhia, and Donetsk regions of Ukraine. They have also been involved in operations outside of Ukraine, specifically in the Bryansk and Belgorod regions. The fighters of the Russian Volunteer Corps share conservative views and traditional beliefs. The main goals: number 1, to restore Ukraine's territorial integrity within its borders as in 1991, and 2, to overthrow the current dictatorship in the Russian Federation. The existence of these 2 military units I find particularly hopeful and promising because I was very pleasantly surprised when I heard that there are actually professional Russian soldiers who fight for Ukraine against Putin. This is something which I find really very, very commendable. At the end of my presentation, I will mention the Azov Brigade because they are the main target of Russian propaganda. Now, I watched a long interview with an Azov volunteer called Denis Sheller, who states that describing Azov as pro-Nazi is, quote, pro-Russian, extreme left, ridiculous nonsense, end quote. I agree with his statement. And the context of the statement is that he is a Croatian volunteer in the Azov brigade, and the interview was Croatian only. So the context was, it was not some kind of English language interview where he euphemized the position of the Azov brigade for the sake of foreign listeners. It was a Croatian only interview where he had no reason to hide his true feelings, so that was the context of the statement. And finally, I will conclude by saying that Russian imperialists have a huge demand for Nazis, but the supply is limited. So that is my presentation.
Thank you. I'm totally how to say neutral by all that facts, or let's say facts. We don't know what is going on, no matter maybe witnessing from that Croatian guy, or because every part in that war, like in every other war, has their witnesses and their truth. So I'm totally indifferent. From my point of view, what I can comment is just that that war was avoidable. I believe in negotiations. Doesn't matter if somebody thinks Ukraine doesn't exist or does exist. It doesn't matter. Who is living now negotiates the best life for itself. So my only concern was has always been the influence and promises from the West to back up Ukrainian part, and actually that led to this kind of disastrous outcome for Ukrainians, useless deaths. In the end, there will be also negotiations. There should be negotiations which will end the war. So for me, every life they lost was spent for nothing, because nobody gained anything. Who gained was American military-industrial complex, mercenaries from many sides, all that industries which were and have been driven by that war to produce arms and keeping the conflict alive in order to make profits. For me, that is what is disgusting, and simply I cannot get over it. And all other reasons can be, in my opinion, solved at the negotiating table without EU as a warmonger, or the US, or any other sides, Croatian, Serbian, Austrian, Hungarian, it doesn't matter. People who live there should sit down and negotiate the best what they have. They know the history, so they are the best to represent their causes. So that's my stand, and I really condemn any other influence and reasoning which results in death of so many people, which is just lost potential for life and building good country and good life for the local people.
Well, I agree. Actually, I disagree with you. I disagree that the American influence was bad. I believe that Russia is solely to blame for this situation. And when it comes to negotiations, I think that the only party which really can decide the outcome of the negotiations is the Ukrainian people, right? So Although I absolutely 100% support the American stance on this situation, but I think that neither the Americans nor the Europeans nor anyone else can, nor the Russians especially, can decide the fate of the Ukrainian people, right? So if they agree that if they accept the situation that they lost parts of eastern Ukraine, they will be the ones who decide that situation, nobody else, right? And I absolutely, totally also understand their position that any kind of territorial loss is unacceptable to them. So I don't think that the people who died defending their homeland died for nothing. And the only thing, I can agree with you that the situation is tragic because there's a huge loss of life and there's a huge, disruption of normal life. But I blame Russia far more apparently than you do. So that's my personal stance.
I blame anyone who pulled the trigger. Doesn't matter if it's Russian, American, or Croatian or whoever. But if I'm I cannot imagine that I interfere in anyone's lives, because if I'm so that guy you cited, he was mercenary, right, in Azov Brigade or whatever. What was his? So he put himself on one side, right? But he should not be in that conflict. He's not in the conflict. Why would he be involved in any conflict which he doesn't know the whole history? Because we cannot know. What I heard in the media, and there was audio. I'm not sure if you heard the phone call between. She's Ukrainian. She was something, I think, Secretary of State. What was her name? From the U.S. when she talked with the ambassador of the U.S. in Ukraine, and they staged the coup, and they were before 2014, and they were talking who they were planning, who to put into power to serve their interest. And it was audio, it's not like a transcript or whatever. So that's just the beginning of the things which happened there. For me, any foreign involvement is unacceptable. It's very clear for me that American influence was far long ago, started long ago with some goals they had to achieve. So for me, I don't know, I haven't been there, I don't know, I can just judge on the information I hear. Putin and Russians and invasion, I condemn, of course, as I said, every death and every move which causes any death of any person. But I think if you see the tries from the Russian side to finish that conflict, and which were all rejected from Zelensky, who was instructed from European Union and stupid promises that we will go with you as long as it's needed. So that's ridiculous. I'm sorry for Ukrainian people to have Zelensky, which was very bad politician. He has personal interest. He was smuggling so much money for his and some others' personal interest. I see that as a treason and total betrayal of the cause and the people. So I cannot judge anything else, but what I know, what I see, and what I hear, and that is just disastrous, because those simple people have their life, they cannot get their life back by any means. And
well, I understand that the Russian side would be willing to accept negotiations, considering that in the present situation they conquered a lot of territory. So at the present time, negotiations would be beneficial for them. I understand that. As regards, I just wanted to add something which you mentioned about Scheller and his involvement in the war in Ukraine. So Denis Scheller is a veteran of the Croatian Homeland War. He has military experience. He has war experience. And someone who survived active participation in the Croatian Homeland War knows how to stay alive. So he has a lot of experience with staying alive. And as such, I believe that he is a huge asset in this war for the Ukrainian side. And as regards his involvement there, in Judaism, there is an obligation to save a person's life. So if you see that someone's life is in danger, you are not allowed to just avoid it and say you're neutral, you're not interested in whatever, right? In Judaism. So in Judaism, you have an obligation to save a person's life. However, that obligation has a very important limitation. And the limitation means that you are not obligated to risk your own life to save another person's life, okay? So this is a very important teaching in this context, because even though I absolutely respect Scheller for going there, and I absolutely support other Croatian volunteers who went there to save Ukrainian lives, I do not agree with sending the Croatian army there in an official manner. So that's my opinion. If someone wants to go there privately and personally, they can and they should, whatever, that's their choice. But I do not believe that we have an obligation to endanger our soldiers by sending them there. So that's something where even my that's a line where even my support for Ukraine doesn't go beyond it.
Is that obligation to save others' lives in Judaism does that allow people to take others' lives in terms of protecting some others? So if they take let's say one side and say, okay, I'm shielding, let's say, or protecting Ukrainians by killing Russians, is that also allowed? So you are...
Yes, it is allowed. Yes, it is allowed if the other side is considered as a pursuer. A pursuer is someone who attacks you with the intention to kill you. And if there is no other way to stop the pursuer, you are allowed to kill the pursuer in order to save the victim of the pursuer.
And that's very vague, because how can you judge?
Well, I don't think it's vague. I think that I think that at the beginning of my presentation, I only mentioned wars of aggressive conquest. There is a different type of war which is permitted in Torah law, and that is a war of self-defense. So in my opinion, in this context, if you analyze the situation, I believe that Russians are waging a war of aggressive conquest, and I believe that Ukrainians are involved in a war of self-defense. So there is a specific difference between those two, right? There is a difference between conquering someone and defending your homeland. So in that situation, if you translate those terms, war of aggressive conquest and war of self-defense, the Russian side is clearly, at least to me, the pursuer, and the Ukrainian side is the one defending itself. So that's the kind of I think it is specific enough to judge your behavior if you find yourself in that situation. Although I lived through the Croatian Homeland War, I was a child at that time, so I have no active war experience. And in addition to that, I have because of the situation Croatia was politically in, I also have no military training, right? So as a complete civilian, I am not able to help Ukraine in a way that Scheller is able, right? But if I had a military training, and if I had a war experience, and if I were a veteran of the Croatian Homeland War, and if I were confident that I would survive this war in Ukraine, I would certainly go there. I would certainly go there.
Too many ifs. War is very unpredictable, you know. You can die.
Well, I believe that the people like Scheller go there voluntarily with the very specific belief that they will survive the war. I don't think that they go there believing they will die in that war. So when you have so much war experience, war is a science, as you know. It's a science. And if you are a scientist in the science of war, your chances of surviving are much, much bigger than someone like me who is a complete civilian.
Well, I agree with that. For me, knowing how the U.S. Staged many coups and the war in Libya and in Vietnam and in Iraq, I'm just I cannot believe that there is any noble cause between their influence except the interest. Even more after knowing that BlackRock and all those financial institutions already put their hand on the Ukraine and arranging the second step after the war is finished, how they will renew and repair Ukraine with their interest, not taking in mind the interest of Ukrainians, but their own interest of capital and investing and whatever it's needed. So for me, that's just economics. There is no noble cause by any means, because that should be that war shouldn't have been started at all. And in my opinion, Russia was provoked, because prior to 2014, if they wanted to, so Putin is very long on in power, if he wanted to do something, he would have done it already a long time ago. Why he needed to wait even after coup in Ukraine 2014? So it was still 8 years waiting, trying to negotiate and calm situation down. Why would he wait so long if it was just about aggression and imperialism? So everything is vague. I don't believe in Western propaganda in that regard. So for me, it's just a business as usual from the American and European side. So since the money has moved to Israel and other conflicts, Ukraine is practically drained out now, and that will not end good for Ukrainian people. That's my opinion.
Israel doesn't need American money or Western money. In fact, the American aid which goes to Israel is only 1% of the Israel economy. So Israel literally does not need American money. And in fact, Israel would benefit hugely if America stopped giving it money, because then American administrations would stop pressuring Israel to do things which harm Israel. So in that regard, I actually agree with you that where American influence is very, very bad is specifically regarding Israel, right? Because America gives small, extremely small amounts of money to Israel, and in exchange for that small money, America actually, blackmails Israel into doing things which harm Israel in very, very specific ways. So in that regard, I agree with you that American influence is bad when it comes to Israel, right?
It's not about do they need their help or not. It's about to fund the military industrial complex in the US. It's not about aiding the helping the Israel or anywhere. It's about taking taxpayers' dollars in the US Congress, voting for help, quote unquote help, and then that help goes to that 5-6 companies, producers of whatever they need, ammunition or whatever, and then they profit from that. It's not about what Israel needs or doesn't need. It's about business. And
okay, Israel is a different topic. I want to keep focused on Ukraine. Israel is a different topic.
General. It's not about what Ukraine needs. If they wanted to help Ukraine, they would solve that thing a long time ago. They wanted to keep Ukraine on the string to last long enough to produce, to vote for many parts of help to Ukraine, which actually finished in that military companies in the US and made profit for US and senators, and of course all that lobbying and whatever happens. So war is just a business. It's nothing special for me, and all other things are just fog for us to talk about. But the business of war is a long time known from the US part.
Okay, you are an economist, so of course you analyze the war, from an economic perspective. I am a Torah scholar, so I have a slightly different perspective and view. But I would just add at the end that because of the existence of those local Russian military units who are very, very passionately against Putin, and actually when I first heard about those units, I was skeptical because I thought it was just Russian propaganda as usual. Initially, I did not believe that there were Russian units fighting for Ukraine against Putin. However, because I studied Russian for 3 semesters, my Russian is good enough so that I actually was able to check those sources in the original Russian, and I actually verified that they literally fight against Putin and they sincerely support Ukraine, right? So in this context, and because of their existence, and because of the growing number of people joining them, I think that an unexpected outcome of this war is that instead of gaining territory as Putin wanted, I think that there is a very serious chance that the Russian Federation will fall apart in some form. That's my opinion. I think there is a very, very serious chance that Russia will actually lose territory instead of gaining it. So I cannot predict when the war will end, but I do believe that the outcome is not clear at all, and I believe that the outcome might actually be Russian territorial losses in the form of some partial disintegration of the Russian Federation, aided specifically by those anti-Putin Russians, who I believe will do absolutely anything to overthrow his dictatorship. So that's something that's an outcome which might not be expected, but it's very, very real in my opinion.
Definitely, we live in the interesting times, and time will tell what will happen. We never know the backstage games, and how Machiavelli played his game, always behind the curtain. So we don't know actually what is on the surface. Is just a tip of the iceberg. When you see all that information which come later, and what happened, and how we learn about all the things in the past, and that's also questionable. Is that final truth? But I'm very skeptic that we will find out final truth. We will find out what they serve us as a part of the history or explanation or whatever theory they want to support. Anyway, that's why I moved to live in Asia, which is so far very quiet and pleasurable, and without any hints to start the war, until Americans come to Taiwan or somewhere else.
Okay, Mario, thank you for your time. I know that you had a very tight schedule, and you managed to find time for us and our discussion, so I appreciate it.
Likewise, thank you too. It was always pleasurable to hear all that opinions we can share together.
And we are Godless Judaism.
We discuss atheism, religion, and everything else.